What did anybody ever get out of being right? What if there's more? And then he called me a jackass.
Makes sense.
So I call this Beyond Belief, the neuroscience of reality itself, perception, and the biology of belief. So we're going to look at the idea of stopping our brains from lying to us. So in this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to explore the neuroscience of belief and perception, revealing how what we believe in is not only shaping our reality, but our health and our behavior as well. So this conversation is going to unpack how the brain predicts reality. So think about that. We're going to talk about how the brain predicts reality and also acknowledge how that doesn't make it real. It just makes your prediction. And we're going to run this stuff. We're going to run the biology of belief and this idea of beyond belief. We're going to run belief itself through the interface response system, like I've kind of done. So, Will's back. He says, stop projecting and just tell us your field of study. So he called, and then he called me a jackass. So, I welcome you guys to evaluate that. So it's important to him. Now, if he wants to, he can look it up. And then he can figure it out on his own. But what Will is trying to do, for whatever reason, and we don't know that because he's a flow burglar, is he's trying to get me to make him feel powerful. Isn't that interesting? So that's an opportunity once again. So, Will, I'd be happy to talk to you after the show and provide you with my credentials. And I'd be happy to do that. And he says, stop playing. So he's still here. He's still here. He's spending a lot of time with us this morning. So stop playing the bullshit victim card and tell us where you obtain. Can I ask a question? If everybody in the majority, does everybody want me to spend a lot of time telling you about my credentials right now? Is that important to everybody or just Will? Is that important? Okay. Well, I right now I don't think anybody else gives a shit. So I'm gonna give you the opportunity to reach out to me, and we'll have a whole conversation about that. Or you could just Google me and look it up and say, "Oh shit, he is a doctor." Okay. So let's get into this. Let's begin with something most people never dispute in life. This is a perfect episode for a lot of these kind of people. And here's something that a lot of people don't dispute because we don't even think about disputing in life. Belief feels like truth. And you can see it playing out. We're having live examples of it right now. It feels earned and it feels worthy of protection. So, like, let's say I say something is important. Like Will is saying, this is important that you prove to me that you're not full of shit, right? And that's a belief system that's important. But everybody else is thinking it's not important to me. But that's your belief system as well. One's not better than the other. But when we have a belief, we feel like it's true and we protect it. And if it's threatened, we'll protect it even more, right? So from a neuroscience standpoint, and that's what's important, this is not just theory. From a neuroscience standpoint, belief feels solid and valuable because it stabilizes perception. And listen to this. Belief stabilizes perception, but it also reduces uncertainty. When we believe in something, that's the value, is it's reducing our uncertainty. And another thing that it does, which is why we tether to it, is that it calms our nervous system down. That's why Will is so upset right now, is because I'm not fulfilling something like if I'm driving at somebody and getting them to try to prove something to me, the greatest thing in the world in my mind would be that I find out that I was right. Like that's what he wants to know. This is great for my episode, by the way, Will, so keep it coming. But what he doesn't know, like let's say he was right. Let's say I'm a charlatan and I'm lying and all that stuff. How would that enrich his day? He doesn't know that yet. So he'd be like, yeah, I knew it. I was right. This guy's full of shit. But then what? You still have a day ahead of you and you still have to like live your life and I get to live mine, you know? And then on the other end of it, let's say that his beliefs were wrong and he finds out, which he can, that he's wrong. What will that do for him or me? It doesn't change the day ahead of us. We still have to enjoy ourselves and take good care of ourselves, try to be a good human and things like that. So one of my favorite mentors always said, "What did anybody ever get out of being right?" I think that's really cool. When you reach the goal of being right, you haven't reached anything. I love that. So remember, reduce uncertainty and it also calms your nervous system. And yet at the same time, every major breakthrough, and this is what I found when I did this research, every major breakthrough that we depend on seems to lie beyond the comfort of our beliefs. Sit with that for a second. So the real question today isn't whether beliefs are powerful. That's not what we're pondering today. It's what happens when belief quietly shifts from a useful tool, which you think is useful when you're in the moment, and it shifts from a useful tool into a poison. We're going to introduce the core signal of today, and here it is. In a strong frame, which is, I hope, what we're creating here, belief ends up being a shortcut that the brain uses to reduce uncertainty. Please sit with that. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Belief is a shortcut that the brain uses to reduce uncertainty, but certainty comes at the cost of curiosity. When you are standing for your belief and you're not willing to move beyond it, and you want to be right versus kind, you're removing yourself from things like potential and curiosity. But you'll be very good at pretending that you don't need those in that moment. What about adaptability and long-term brain health? If you look at the studies. So what that's saying is that if you're stuck with your stuff, it's it's taking you out of the game of life. And it's also affecting your health, how long you're gonna live. Now, if that makes you angry, that's fine. You know, I would be angry too. I was very angry the day that I found out that I was always trying to be right versus kind. I was very angry about that. But it came in handy one day when I decided to get out of my way. The beliefs don't form because humans are irrational, by the way. These are not irrational triggered things. They form because uncertainty, I love this. Uncertainty is a metabolically expensive thing. It's exhausting being uncertain. If you're confused and you know what it's like to feel confused, it's exhausting. And we don't like to do that much work. It's frustrating. That's why a lot of people will move on to something else, but it's exhausting to be frustrated. So that's why the brain always leans towards trying to fill in the gap, make something up, and create a belief system. And once we like it enough, and maybe it's conducive with our mother, father, teacher, preacher, and in our environment, we're going to stick with it and we're going to protect it. Belief is one of the most efficient strategies at restoring and regulating your energy. Now, there's a very big downside to it, but that's why it's there. It reduces ambiguity, it stabilizes your identity. Oh, isn't it important for our identity to have a belief system? And it also creates the illusion of control. Here's a trade off to consider today. What if the goal isn't to replace your beliefs, just as I said, but to temporarily set them down or set them aside long enough to see what else exists? But what if our goal was to set them aside, put them down long enough to entertain not only what else exists, but maybe find something better or more factual or even more conducive? You don't have to change your ways, but do you know everything? One of my favorite questions to ask, and I've shared it with you many times, is what else might be true, JC? Because my knee-jerk reflex when somebody says something mean to me or insults or something like that, I have to put that aside because my belief system is engineering that and say, what else might be true? And when I do that, I start to think empathetically for them. And it just moves it further and further away from being about me. Because even if I think inside that I'm 100% certain of something, I will allow myself to dispute that so that I can move into the space where I can better understand somebody else that's completely different. So, perception is prediction. Yes, the meaning making machines in our skulls are projectors. They're projectors. It's such a nice thing to step away from a conversation and not have to participate in it emotionally and step away from it and just evaluate one's projection and say, interesting. So that's remember, whenever adversity strikes, if you allow yourself to do this work, when you get my book and you learn about the interface response system, it's like the world becomes a game. And you realize you no longer have to be a victim of anything. You're in control. If something feels real, it must be real, right? I don't know about that. I mean, you might think that way, but for me at this time, I don't know. I know I feel it and I know what it feels like to believe things, but what I've learned from reading a lot of books and hearing some amazing people speak is I think might be making that up. But often beliefs are actually post hoc explanations. Prediction is mistaken as perception. So what that's saying is that we're predicting things, meaning we're making it up, but it's got the illusion of being an actual perception. So, you guys know the whole idea of what you see is what you get. It's true. What you see is what you get. The question that we're asking right now is, does that make it what is? Does that make it what is? So belief is not just psychological. It's also physiological. And this is why we see the world getting worried sick right now. That's why it's important for you to be able to separate yourself. So moving beyond belief is really now about longevity and brain health. I'm going to share with you guys a study because I'm writing a whole kind of a dissertation on this. I'm going to share with you a study that is peer reviewed. I think it comes out of Harvard or something like that. But that shows that people that just allow themselves to be open and curious and learn new things, not just be stuck in their way, are actually maintaining cognitive capabilities longer, living longer, and having a better quality of life just by remaining open and curious. So if you're closed and you have exclamation points and you don't ever entertain question marks, but you don't want to learn anything new, even about yourself, it's not a good forecast, right? So it's not just psychological, it's physical. So this is where this conversation, and we're kind of moving to the latter part of it here, but it expands to longevity and mental health. That's what we're talking about right now. So research, just like I showed you right there, is that people that exhibit curiosity and openness to support, openness to learning things, these things support cognitive resilience, slower cognitive decline. That's something that's really important to me. My biggest fear is losing my brains, right? Now, somebody's probably in YouTube saying, he's got no brains. I love you guys. I love all of you. I love all of you. And also better adaptation with age. I will, if you reach out to me before the piece comes out, it'll be in the podcast episode. I'll give you the link. So rigid belief. So here's the opposite from being open and curious. Rigid belief, and we've seen some examples of this morning, and we're seeing it now with the Super Bowl. Rigid belief, by contrast, reduces neuroplasticity, Remember, this is not me saying it. I'll give you the article. Certainty may feel strong. Okay, this doesn't say much for feelings, but limits growth neurologically. So here's a subtle but powerful reframe that we can use right now. Certainty feels safe, but it's curiosity that will keep you alive. I'm going to say that again. So this is based on those studies. Certainty feels good, dopamine wise, it feels safe. And a lot of books tell you that you need certainty. Set a goal, get a goal. But it's curiosity that we're finding keeps us alive. Hmm. So throw a couple hms around. Allow yourself to not make up your mind, or at least not so fast. So in the context of things like I'm frightened of, like Alzheimer's prevention and long-term brain health, staying open and curious, you know, it's very practical for those things. So let's just quickly run this idea through the interface response system. Remember, the interface response system is kind of my flagship program. It'll be in the book. I hope you guys will enjoy that, or I hope you'll read it and hate it and tell me how much you hated it. But I hope you at least expose yourself to it. So we're going to run belief through the four steps, and this would be giving you the ability to create that space and come up with a response rather than a reaction. What you're seeing in some of the behavior and the interactions that I was having before, those are reactions. Those are not responses. A response is one that's well thought out. It's not coming from like viscerally from your conditioned mind. So the first thing that we would do, step one would be perceive. That's the first step of the interface response system. And that's just where we notice the belief without defending it. Okay. And we also know a lot more about belief right now. So step two would be saying, pause it, put it aside long enough that you'll allow yourself to step into the space of possibilities, where you could even entertain different ideas and maybe move to step three, which is called process. So, because now we're in the space, we've put our knee jerk reflex on pause. We can go get it back anytime we want. But now we can not only dispute, but contemplate. And from a curious place, which we now know is healthy, is start to look at alternative perspectives. What else might be true? What else might be true? What might be going on with that person right there? And then we move to step four, where we proceed, where we create a response versus a reaction. So that's the way the interface response system works with this. The interface response system is something that transforms belief from an identity into some sort of a hypothesis. It's open and it's curious. If you have an identity based on a belief, there's no openness to that. You're going to protect that. So in this framework, belief becomes optional. That's tough. That's tough for people to do. It becomes temporary in some sense, and it's also updatable. But my beliefs to always remain updatable. Are you updatable or no? Or no? So that's cognitive freedom, and that promotes longevity and quality of life. So in closing, maybe the most powerful move today isn't finding the right belief. And remember, I'm not saying your belief is wrong. You think it's right. That's all that matters. Maybe it's more about reclaiming your right to not rush into one. That's a thought. Have I been forced or rushed into this belief? Or did I really contemplate and decide that it is what is? Maybe it's more about reclaiming your right to not rush into one. So to sit with uncertainty, kids are struggling with that right now. To sit with uncertainty, allow yourself to stay curious and let the believable remain possible, and let the unbelievable remain possible as well. Because everything meaningful that we now rely on in our lives once required someone brave enough to say, just like the phone and the internet and all that stuff, right? Or even just on a small front, maybe I am a doctor, right? It had to start with somebody brave enough to say, what if there's more? So the final question that I would ask you guys, what belief are you protecting right now? What belief are you protecting right now? Not because it's true, but because letting go of it feels unsafe. Anyway, I love and appreciate you all of you. I really do. In my acknowledgments of my book, I very, very sincerely, not in a disrespectful way, um, I'm very, very grateful for adversity. I've been through a lot of adversity. And that's how I've established this place where I don't find myself being bothered by stuff that is nothing in comparison to what I've actually been through. Um, but I really appreciate the opportunity, whether it comes from the universe or comes from some of you, um, to challenge myself. But it also makes me recognize how some of you are just so incredibly special and people that I love having in my life. So remember, if you learn something today, give it away. That's how it's going to stay. And I love and respect your time. So have an amazing day, and I'll see you next month. We're going to talk next time. We're going to talk about brain rot next week. Great topic there. So love you guys. Thank you. Thanks, Will. Thank Moses. Thanks. You know, all you guys. 90, 97. Love you guys. Have a great day. Appreciate it.
Hmm. Makes sense.